Isn't this just a featherboard? Kind of, sort of. Okay, a couple years ago, while traveling back to North Carolina from Ohio, stopped by the Woodcraft store in Parkersburg, West Virginia, and picked up from their clearance section this JessEm clear cut stock system. This is a device that's supposed to make it easier to keep your stock tight against the fence on the table saw, other tools as well. But for me, what appealed to me is that I do have occasionally some long rips to make, and it's not as convenient to be right up on the fence when you're working with great big long stock. So ironically, my wife is returning at this very moment from Ohio, and I remembered that I wanted to get this thing out and get working on it. So let's see what's in here. So I have in place the main table of the Mark V model 520 and the Pro fence, but over there on the extension side, I added a 510 extension table and fence because I want to see what differences there are between these applications when we install this on the Shopsmith. I am by far not the first to do this. There's been, over the years, over on the Shopsmith forums, several people that have installed this, which is the only reason why I went ahead and bought it, because I knew that it could be useful. But let's open this thing up and see what we got. Now this was, like I say, something that someone else had returned, and I haven't opened it, so it could be interesting what we're about to see. All right, so far so good. It does look like things at least were returned to their original positions. We got a manual, which of course we'll read later after we run into problems. This is the part that allows you to mount this on top of a standard table saw fence. You know, if I had, say, for example, a Biesmeyer fence or one of the copies of the Biesmeyer, this would be screwed or bolted down to that. What we're going to have to do is modify either this to fit on top of these fences, or we might just eliminate them altogether and use the T slot in the top of the extrusion, which is one advantage we have over some fences on the market. Bit of a variety of hardware. That pack was never opened. So this is all starting to look really good. Let's go ahead and pull these pieces and parts out of here. Cool. Hardware pack was never opened, and it did come with a really nice JessEm Torx wrench. It's pretty cool. And woo, look at that. Yeah, JessEm is a Canadian company. Wow, that is so beefy. Golly. So yeah, this is the T, you call that the T nut that would normally slide within this extrusion right here. I do like that. Oh, that has a great feel to it. And I'm not so sure I'm going to eliminate that. It does seem to be sitting awfully high. Of course, our stock would be sliding underneath it, so we would have to have some clearance. We've got a series of holes, a variety of diameters and countersinks, and one of those ought to line up perfectly with a cap screw. I've got a couple different locations that we could mount this. I'm not sure which one's the right one yet. I definitely want to make sure that, I mean, they're not going to work if I have those rollers beyond the length of the fence. And so I could cut that at some point when I'm happy with it. But in that position, I don't know, it seems like maybe I should go into the other slot. The other slot actually might position me. It's interesting. If I go over here, yeah, that actually gets this extrusion a little closer to this edge. I like that. Okay. And then the next question is, are these machine screws so long that if I tighten them, they're just going to poke on through into the fence? We don't want that to happen. And we can tell that by winding that T-nut on there. You can see there's about 1/8 of an inch exposed. Yeah, we're going to want to grind a little bit off the tips of those bolts. All right. So it's my understanding that you position these so that your stock is clearing the black portion of this, and then you lock it down. You don't want to set it to where it's clearing the wheels, because you want to pass underneath the wheels with a little bit of resistance. And let's see what happens. I'm gonna try to move this forward with about 1/4 of an inch gap between the lumber and the fence. Okay, well, what do you know? Let's try that again. What I was trying to say is I'll push it through, trying to maintain about 1/4 of an inch of gap. It immediately closed that gap up. It did exactly what it's supposed to do. Look at this. I'm just going to push it straight on through, and boom, it has closed the gap even before it reached the second roller. That is slick. It also then acts as an anti-kickback. So isn't this just a featherboard? Kind of, sort of, but a featherboard that's on the main table here that's pushing against the edge of the board has to be constantly readjusted as you pass different size widths of stock through, especially if you're working with surfaced on two sides lumber. Very common with hardwood. You have a nice, maybe consistent thickness, but the width of the board was whatever width came off of the tree. Well, you're constantly having to move your featherboard in and out to accommodate the different widths. With this, it's just set up to push the stock against the fence. That's really cool that it just does what it's supposed to do. Now you can see that it does have further adjustment. It has the ability to slide out quite a ways or all the way close to the fence. If this were running over a saw blade, I certainly would not want to have my lumber on the left-hand side of the blade to be being pushed against the blade. But it wouldn't hurt to have this, if it is in fact ahead of the blade, to be pushing the stock towards the fence. So maybe I would position this one here, and maybe this one's a little further over. Of course, this all depends upon using your saw guards, which I like to use. But this work as well with it that far away from the fence. Pushes it right over. I can see this working really well on a project that I have upcoming, which is going to require me to rip some very long stock 10 to 12 feet in length. And I'll be doing some of that on my own. It's always nice to have help. But here, where the actions happen in the business end, it's nice to have something holding the stock tight against the fence. Wow. Yeah, I've had a few people that knew I bought this and have been bugging me to get it mounted, and thank you for that encouragement. I keep putting it off. Now let's put it on the 510 fence and see if it mounts the same. Now I'm still not convinced that we couldn't mount this directly on top of the Shopsmith extrusion with just a couple T-nuts, but that's going to require the drilling and retapping of those holes to work with these knobs. These are really nice knobs, so I don't see any reason why I wouldn't use those. But let's slide the fence off of that, and slide the fence off of that, slide that off of the fence. And it looks to me like it's going to be just as easy as sliding this onto the 510 fence extrusion. Of course it is. Now, we're positioned a little differently because the fence is so much more narrower. I'd probably want to go ahead and move this so that the T-nuts are actually in the opposite side of this piece. Yep. Something like that. What I'm seeing here that I'm not entirely thrilled about is where we've got a bolt that is right dead center in the single T slot, and you can see that this extrusion is not being supported by the fence. So I would be inclined to mount this on another piece of plywood, perhaps, to get us supported all the way out there. Or perhaps we could put a fender washer or something that would get us that level of support. But I mean, that was easy to transfer this from one fence to the other. I could see how this could come in quite handy. All right, fantastic. This isn't obviously anything new. These have been around a long time. Just for me, I wasn't sure exactly how easily they would install and remove from Shopsmith equipment. This is the 510 and the 520 fence system. These are the most recent iterations of the Shopsmith fence. It would be a little bit more difficult to use this on a Mark V Model 500. You'd have to fabricate an auxiliary fence face that would wrap around the top and give you a place to attach it. That's really not all that difficult. Both of these fences have an extruded T-slot shape that works with this little captured nut that Shopsmith calls a T-nut. That's right. These are not the same things that we buy at the hardware store to put threads in wood, but this is what they call a T-nut. I say go for it. This is a great idea. It's a proven product in the market, and there is nothing to it. Just grab yourself a couple of these from Shopsmith. Make sure you get a couple cap screws to match. These are I used the 1/4 20 holes, which were a perfect match for the holes that were already drilled and countersunk in the top of that fence extrusion. I look forward to your questions, comments, cheap shots, and make it a great day.